I'm getting increasingly concerned about the concentration of power in terms of the ability to censor ideas and conversations online.
Hello everyone, my name is Stephen Parton and you're listening to the Feedback Loop on Singularity Radio, where we keep you up to date on the latest technological trends and how they're impacting the transformation of consciousness and culture, from the individual to society at large. This week our guest is Liv Boeree, who got her start studying astrophysics in England, became well known as one of the world's most successful poker players, then transitioned into effective altruism and science communication. In this conversation, we dip our toes into Liv's background, game theory, and the mental frameworks and motivations that Liv uses to navigate reality. But the greater part of the discussion actually explores the ways in which social media is negatively influencing rational discourse and our ability to be rational actors. This felt especially relevant given that many of you listening to this podcast are now actively involved in Singularity University's online community, where one of our major foci is solving this very issue. In fact, the heart of the community is based on having an incredibly diverse range of thinkers coming together to discuss complex and difficult problems in nuanced ways so that we're all capable of finding novel solutions to the challenges that are confronting our species. As always, you can find out more about that community at su.org. But in the meantime, sit back, relax, and enjoy as we welcome to the Feedback Loop, Liv Boeree. My first question is, who is your favorite metal band?
Oh, who is my favorite metal band? You see, asking me a question like this, where I have to narrow this down to one band, is just very unfair. Well, the band that was most informative on my music taste was Metallica, who I was just so obsessed with. That was right in the peak of my late teens when I first really got into music, into metal. So I would say Metallica, but actually if I had one band I could only ever listen to for the end of time, I think it would be Children of Bodom.
Oh, interesting.
Nice. The melodic death metal, it just speaks to my soul.
I love the combination of melodic and death in one genre of music.
It's it's just neoclassical, but with growly vocals. And they're just so talented. And sadly, the singer guitarist passed away recently. But they're just true sort of musical savants.
Maybe we can use that to bridge into your background a little bit. So what was the Renaissance story of Liv moving from astrophysics and metal to poker, altruism, and science communication? Could you take us on a little short journey of what that was like?
Sure. So studied astrophysics at university, which was also while I was deep in my heavy metal phase. My original plan before university was to become a research scientist, but then I was so into metal and guitar, I wanted to become a rock star. And when I graduated, I needed to find a way to make some money. And somehow fell into playing game shows as a way of doing so. I've always been a very competitive person as well, and just loved games, particularly video games. So it was kind of a natural transition, and it was on one of these game shows that I learned to play poker. It was actually they wanted 5 beginners for the show and teach them how to play poker to see what personality type is best suited for the game. Not a very well controlled science experiment, but a fun premise nonetheless. And so that was the first time I ever played poker. Was also my first time on TV. Actually, it was I was 21, just graduated, full of bravado. And I just completely fell in love with the game so much. It just ticked all the boxes from I think my personality type at the time, because I was so competitive and I loved playing a boys game and beating them at it. That was my identity, I guess, at the time, that I really wanted to do. And so then turned professional a few years later, did that for best part of a decade. But then it was during that time, sort of in 2014, my now partner Igor and some of his friends, we got interested in this concept of effective altruism, which is, basically there's so many problems in the world. How do we figure out which ones to prioritize? There's only limited resources that can be spent philanthropically. And so we started a sort of organization movement type thing within the poker community, getting poker players to encourage them to donate a portion of their winnings to only the most provably cost-effective charities or research organizations, basically getting the maximum bang for your buck when it comes to donating, which I think a lot of poker players appreciate, because they are typically rationalists of that type. They definitely care about return on investment. And in my opinion, philanthropy should really be no different. It's good to have the heart in your giving, use your heart when it comes to choosing where to donate to, but you need to use your head too. And so it was really about combining the head and the heart. And then, so then that sort of carried on. And now I'm retired from poker, and mostly, I don't really know what exactly I do at the moment. I give a lot of talks on sort of rationality and decision making and sort of the life lessons from poker. But really my passion lies in explaining complex concepts through video, and mostly working on that at the moment.
Would you say that's the place that you're most passionate about right now? Like if you were me and you were about to ask you the question that you thought would bring out the most passionate response in you, what question would you ask yourself? What topic would you want to discuss?
I mean, the thing that I actually spend most of the time thinking about at the moment is just like the combative nature of social media, and like why it feels like everyone's just gone a little bit insane lately. Mm-hmm. And whether that's actually the case, and whether social media is an accurate reflection of the average person or not. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But it definitely feels like there's a more combative vibe going on than there was even a couple of years ago. So that's definitely something I have a lot I think about a lot. And just like, what does the risk landscape look like for humanity over the coming few decades? Because it ain't great, I don't think.
Yeah, so. I just talked to Toby Ord from the Future of Humanity Institute, and he was telling me about his 1 in 6, his prediction of 1 in 6 chance that we're gonna kill ourselves.
I'm not at all saying that Toby's prediction is far more accurate than mine would ever be, but my intuition says it's even worse than that.
Oh no.
Yeah, I mean, my intuitions can definitely be wrong. Yeah. This is one instance where I hope that my intuition is just being excessively risk averse and over worried, worried over nothing. But it doesn't feel like it.
Let's play on that a little bit. Maybe you do a lot with the effective altruism, which is something that is big with our community, because our big focus is like using technology to solve problems in the world. And that's obviously a very ambiguous, nebulous, nuanced task, and it could probably benefit from a lot of rationale being injected into it. You started, I think, your company because you thought there was some maybe irrational behavior in the effective altruism world. Or maybe we were just going about it in a way that, as you said, wasn't as focused on combining the head and the heart. Are there certain things that you would like to see happen in that domain that you think could help us right this ship, become less risk oriented?
Well, I mean, obviously it depends on which specific risk. Are we talking about the risk from nuclear war? That's something that's sort of this complex game theoretic problem where you need to simultaneously get everyone to disarm, follow disarmament. There's actually a really cool idea I heard about recently, which is we need more nuclear energy. We should be building nuclear power plants instead of taking them offline and turning them into coal plants, or replacing them with coal plants, which is what's currently happening. There's this movement to turn the uranium that's currently sitting inside of all these vast numbers of nuclear weapons, of which there's too many there's more than is needed to maintain, the Nash equilibrium of mutually assured destruction. So we could repurpose some of that and actually put it into nuclear power, and that's two birds with one stone. But yeah, so when it comes to that, that's more of a game theoretic problem. Then you've got like the risks of potential synthetic biology, whether it's intentional or accidental, and just in general, like there's some really incredible biological breakthroughs on the horizon. But as with all these things, they're often dual purpose. They can do incredible good, but they can also do incredible bad. So how do we find a way to navigate the pressures of progress versus the pressures of making, of safety? They don't always have to be a dichotomy. And then, more generally, how do we make, a big part of our problems are that there's a big detachment between what the public thinks is the right thing to do and what actually is the right thing to do. And understandably, political leaders or business leaders are under immense pressure to satiate the public viewpoint. But how can we do that if people are not, it's, again, now this is the question, like, are people leaning towards overly simplistic answers more than they used to? Has nuance died? If you hang out on social media, it kind of feels like it. Another friend mentioned sort of how we seem to be devolving into symbols. It was back in the good old days, in the historical, not the good old days, but like medieval times, everything was about symbols because people couldn't read. There was no printing press. There was no way to sort of really convey nuanced information aside of just like, this is the Christian cross, and that stood for something, and generally a form of morality and good. And it felt like maybe we were moving away from symbols as more and more people became literate and we had better ways of communicating these complex ideas. But again, it kind of feels like we're going back into symbolism again, but just in the form of hashtags and wristbands and these social movements, which at their core are actually based on good ideas, but in reality they get lumped sort of in with a sort of broader range of political movements, which don't actually necessarily, they often seem to come with a lot of baggage, and they're trying to simplify down a lot of real complexities into this like one symbol, and then people become overly attached and like it's sort of like this this Disneyland of like, anyone who believes in the symbol is good and anyone who doesn't is bad. And how do we make nuance sexy again, I guess? So does that answer the question? I'm not sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it gives us some avenues to take too, which is, where do you think maybe science communication and game theory plays into solving these issues? Do you think that there's power in those two mediums to really address these, or maybe not?
There's certainly power in like platforms, longer form video. YouTube is it's the second most used search engine behind Google itself. And the benefit of that is that there's actually a lot of, it's a very informationally dense medium, video. And on top of that, the videos can be quite long. So you can really get some high quality content on there and explain a far more complex concept better than you ever could in 280 characters on Twitter. So yeah, there are ways to sort of use the different social media platforms to discuss complex concepts, but at the same time, the landscape of the internet, the new currency is attention, attention and time, as opposed to before it was like physical real estate and sort of goods and services. Now it's now getting eyeballs on websites or on videos or on followers to your account as opposed to elsewhere. And these like competitive dynamics they drive these sort of race to the bottom type scenarios in terms of like, you need to have your all these media companies, whereas before it was like maybe just the New York Times and the Washington Post and like a handful of like these big centralized organizations. They're now competing against all these little startup media companies, which in some ways is great, but at the other time, the downside of that is that it's now much more competitive. And so those who will be willing to follow more unscrupulous strategies, having heavily clickbaited, preloaded headlines to get the angry clicks, will sort of drive this devolvement of complex, nuanced discourse. So how do we compete against that?
Yeah, what worries me is it seems like to some extent we're actually engaging in it on a peer-to-peer level too. Like I see a lot of people who aren't small media companies or big media companies, but who are just regular people, and because they want their coaching business or, anything that they're doing to succeed, I see a lot of exploitive language, a lot of the cult playbook moves. I've talked to people about this before, the love bombing and the certain things that you do when you want to start a cult. You see it in friends doing it to other friends, and that's where I get really worried. Is that's killing the grassroots, side of things, where I think a lot of the revolutions, so to speak, that are necessary would usually happen.
Mm.
Do you talk about thinking in probabilities a lot? Is that something that you think might benefit the situation? Is getting people away from these black and white approaches?
I mean, yeah, I hope so. I mean, it certainly helped for me. Before I got into poker, I was definitely, I think it's part and parcel of being younger as well. Generally, as you get older, you appreciate things aren't as simple as they might appear, and you generally become a bit more nuanced. But specifically, poker trained me to see the world as a sort of just clouds of probability distributions, and the branches of options for the future, but also the beliefs that I hold about things in the past. Especially in today's informational landscape, it's an absolute mess. It's really hard to know what is truthful and what isn't. What is accurate and what isn't. So again, being able to assign not only probabilities to events in the future, but also to explanations of things that have now, are happening now or are in the past, is extremely useful. Because then also, like you're assigning a number, be like, okay, I'm 80% confident it was a zoonotic origin for COVID, or 80% it's a lab leak. Now you're acknowledging, you're saying that you think it's most likely to be X or Y, but you're not so attached to it that you identify with it. You're not saying, oh, you're not saying I am someone who believes in the zoonotic origin or the lab leak. You're saying I am someone who thinks there's most likely to be the case. Like if I was to bet money on this, I would put most of it on that side.
Yeah.
And that then gives it makes it easier to change your mind when new evidence comes to light. And B, it helps it helps you actually it gives this an extra layer of granularity than this simple, yes, no, either or, black and white thinking.
Do you think that our desire to have curated social media presence, where people follow us for certain views that we hold, kind of locks us into denying those probabilities? Like as you were speaking there, it got me thinking that if somebody's part of a certain tribe and they've acquired a certain amount of followers because they identify as that tribe, even if they think there's a 20% chance that it's zoonotic and not from a lab, they'll go with the lab leak if their community wants it to be a lab leak, or vice versa, where it's like it doesn't really matter what I think or what the probabilities come out to, as long as I appease my online persona and tribe.
Well, I mean, there's definitely a pressure. There is an incentive on people to satisfy what their follower base currently thinks. That's why it's important to cultivate to build a culture in your follower base and in your own behaviors of being someone who isn't necessarily predictable in what they're going to think and say about a certain thing, and that is quite, they're someone who will go, oh, I did believe this, but actually now I've changed my mind and now I think it's that, and these are the reasons, and then even change back again if they feel like they need to. With my experience with my follower base, I was, and I started by, being overtly political, I guess, around the time that Trump got in. into power, I was very upset about it. And I would say I got a lot of followers who were sort of that same mindset. As my political, just as information has changed, and I'd say my political beliefs have evolved over time and just become a bit more complex. I would say I'm less firmly in any one particular tribe than I used to be, because I can see the errors of all of them. No one's doing everything exactly right, and realizing it's a little bit more than this one-dimensional, right-left spectrum. That's definitely, when I then tweet something that isn't conventionally, an anti-Trumper would say, it's there, I would get quite a bit of hate for it. But over time, but I never apologized for something where they're like, I can't believe you're saying that. So what, you're saying Trump was right on this? Yeah, he's right on some things. Yeah, I agree with this particular point, for example. And because I've never apologized and sort of not stuck to my guns, but like just no, been honest, be like, no, this is these are my reasons. Then my follower base, by and large, has cultivated to being people who are just, I don't like to say the term radically centrist, because centrist applies you're in the middle on everything, and that's not the case. But just, complex thinkers, basically, appreciating the complex of our enormous geopolitical issues that the world is facing.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that we mentioned before going on air, that I think that's how I found you. And actually, I think that's what attracted me to you originally, was like, okay, here's somebody who's a courageous thinker, who's just being honest on with their perspective on the world right now. And that's a pretty rare thing, unfortunately, it seems like these days. What do you think gives you that resilience or that courage? Is it because you're just used to, like, I'm gonna play a hand of cards for a few $1 million or euros, and so I'm used to taking risk? Or do you just not care because you...
No, I definitely care what people think about me. I can't say, I've become, again, thicker skinned over time, but I wouldn't put myself in the category of someone, who just truly doesn't care what others think. There are thought leaders like that who I do respect, like their ability to be like that. Like Robin Hanson or Tyler Cowen, someone like that. They just say what they think, and they don't really care how it's necessarily perceived. I'm not like that. But yeah, probably some poker has given me a thick skin, but it's a different kind of resilience that you need. What I would say has sort of inoculated me is that I've intentionally curated and surrounded myself, built a network of people who I would consider to be deeply original thinkers, and people who have been cancelled, or just, like some of my closest friends are people who are kind of loosely affiliated to the intellectual dark web. So, I've seen them be put through the ringer so badly, and they're like, look, I'm still here. I'm still going to fight the good fight. You can too. And so I've deliberately curated my feed of people who try to stand up for what they think is right in the face of an online mob. Sometimes they're wrong, but that's okay. And, and I don't always agree with them, certainly not. I have to be careful not to follow too many of those people, because then I'm going to become in that own little echo chamber of being the ones who will always stand up. And I think partly, I hate to use the word, but partly it comes to, I do have a position of privilege in that I feel like I have a very strong network that if it all goes wrong, I can fall back on to, like, someone will probably hire me for something. So I think it's a little bit of just ensuring that my income is largely independent to, being cancelled per se.
Aside from the game theory and the thinking and probabilities that kind of ties into that, are there other mental frameworks that you use to navigate reality? Like, do you tell yourself stories? Like, I use some quotes myself. When somebody excludes you, draw a bigger circle to include them. We're monkeys guessing at the cosmos. That's another phrase that I say to myself. Robert Anton Wilson gave me perpetual agnosticism, always, which is my way of just saying, like, I don't know in all moments. Do you have any, like, frameworks or things like that kind of help guide you through things?
Like little aphorisms or stuff?
Yeah.
I have one of my favorite phrases I ever read. It's written by this guy, Forrest Landry, and he wrote this book. What was it called? an immanent metaphysics. I believe I might be misremembering the name of it, but anyway, it had this little statement in it, which was that love is that which enables choice. And I think that is so beautiful, because I'm very fortunate that I've had a lot of love in my life, very loving, supportive family. I have a very, very loving and supportive partner. And what's the thing they all have in common really is, aside of always supporting me, they've encouraged me to make my own decisions and given me a platform as much as they could to then feel free to go out and try and make mistakes. Like my parents would always be like, what would you, they gave me a choice of what to do, how to go and navigate the world. And they tried to minimize the rules that they gave. And that really is love, because it's really hard it's very tempting if you're in a relationship with someone to, because out of love, like worrying for them, like, no, well, don't do this and don't do that. But actually true love is giving them, and not, protecting them as much as you can, but through empowering them to make their own decisions. I've just always loved that. And I use it as a way. Sometimes, like if I look at friends who are in relationships and they're like, oh, I don't know if this is working out. I often put it against that benchmark. I'm like, well, are you gaining or losing choice out of this relationship? I also like to put things into like game theory terms. It's like, is your relationship a positive sum game, a zero sum, or a negative sum? Zero sum basically doesn't really exist in reality, because there's always some kind of externalities. But when the two of you are together, does the sum, is the total greater than the parts, or is it less? And you can usually tell quite quickly which it is. So yeah, that's another sort of lens I've been looking things through. Like, is this a positive sum or a negative sum interaction? That's actually what my next series of videos are going to be on.
Wonderful.
Yeah,
I love the idea of being inside your head and watching you psychoanalyze people through game theory.
So it's slightly deranged sometimes. They're like, and it's I have to be careful not to like overfit it as a sort of I don't know if it's an ethical model, whatever the hell kind of model it is.
Sure.
I find I'm thinking about it a little too much sometimes, but it's definitely a fun lens to put on now and then.
I was gonna say a useful lens, to be sure. I look through the lens of neuroscience a lot, in the way maybe you look through the lens of game theory. And when I look through that lens, I always just think about amygdala activation and the fight or flight. And my thought is, if we have people who are scared, if we have people who don't feel safe, because maybe they don't have like the love and support like you were talking about, then that choice, the degrees of freedom and the options you have really start to limit, because you're no longer using that part of your brain that's doing complex storytelling and problem solving, and you're really reduced to this, like, I just have to survive. And maybe that means aligning myself with this tribe or following this meme because it's really simple and my brain can't handle complex right now anyway. It's not really a question, but just something I guess that I was thinking about as you were talking about that quote that I think is really relevant to our relationship with technology.
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely spot on. Like, people, so much of their behaviors, particularly in this like current cancel culture climate, people, it is devastating to have not only an online mob come upon attack you, but then for your possibly losing your job to face on top of that. But humans aren't designed for that level of ostracization, that level of the reason we have a flight or fight response is because it stems from, if you get kicked out of your social group, you used to die. Your tribe, everyone depended upon the tribe for survival, because it wasn't easy being a hunter-gatherer. And those instincts are hardwired in us, and so you feel like you're getting kicked out of tribe, whether it's online or wherever, especially if you don't have then a sort of loving support network in the real world to fall back on. It's devastating for people. So it's no wonder that people are like starting to self-censor. And I still catch myself doing it. I don't tweet. I mean, it's a good thing to not tweet everything that's on your mind. I think that's part and parcel of the problem. People, it's like perhaps excessively open. But at the same time, like there are certain hot topics where I'm like, okay, it's too soon to actually give my real thoughts on this of what I think is causing this problem, because everyone's still emotionally up in arms, and it's like, do I want to have 50,000 knives pointing at me through Twitter?
I usually have that moment. I'm like, do I really want to open this wound up? Like, I know that if I post this, I'm gonna have to come back and like talk about it, and this is gonna take up a lot of my time.
Yeah.
Is it worth it? Usually, it's
Yeah.
not.
The eternal dilemma.
Yeah, the Twitter eternal dilemma. I saw that you recently did a discussion with a group. I can't remember. I think it was on Discord called Homo Techno. Is that correct? Are you open to sharing a little bit about what you discussed in that?
Sure. Well, so that was with Grimes, or C, as I know her. She asked me if I would come and join her on it, because she was meant to be doing this like live discussion session with the Discord crew. But on that, we announced that we're going to be starting a podcast together called Homo Techno. Very excited about it. I mean, she's been a good friend for a couple of years, and we've been musing on doing one. And the name comes from obviously Homo sapiens, but have we evolved into have we upgraded or evolved? Some people might think it's a downgrade into Homo Techno as the next step. So it's going to be loosely around technology and futurism. I mean, she's obviously basically something from a sci-fi novel anyway, and I'm pretty obsessed with futurism too. But I think we'd like to use the platform as a means to sort of open the Overton window on a number of topics. It's nice because her and I actually, we disagree on some things politically. So hopefully our own dialogue will help sort of have constructive conversations of people from differing viewpoints, because that's really all we can do. And again, like that's why podcasts are such a great medium, because they are a long form opportunity to talk about something nuanced. Of course, there will always be the danger that people will take little snippets out, and everything can be edited to fit whatever narrative you want, and I'm sure that will happen to us. But yeah, no, it's exciting. I don't know when we're going to actually. It's difficult because I'm in the UK right now, she's in the US, but we'll hopefully be recording some of that soon.
Can you describe for people who might not know what the Overton window is, and can you maybe talk about some of the topics on the podcast that you think the window might need to be expanded on, if maybe conversations around AI or whether or not this is a good transformation that we're experiencing as a species?
Well, yeah, so that's definitely one of the main topics. To explain the Overton window, basically that's the term coined to basically describe the range of topics that are considered allowable discourse. So there will be certain beliefs or ideas that, for whether good or bad reasons, are too taboo to be discussed in polite society, or whatever you want to call it. But there are certain things that people will not discuss, certain ideas people will not float, maybe because they actually are just bad ideas, or maybe because people, for whatever reason, aren't able to listen to them in a rational way. And in my opinion, particularly online, it's good to keep, there are forces at play that are trying to close the Overton window more and more and more. And generally speaking, like an authoritarian regime will have a very narrow Overton window of what can and can't be discussed. Like there's a lot of things you can't say in North Korea. So that would be an example of a narrow Overton window, whereas technically the US is meant to be a place of free speech. So in theory, that's a very wide Overton window. So that doesn't mean to say that are things that everything is worth discussing, having a wide Overton window. It just means that if there are good reasons, then you should be able to discuss things. And you should be able to float ideas without being fearful for your job or your social group or your life in some cases. So yeah, that's I'm getting increasingly concerned about the concentration of power in terms of the ability to censor ideas and conversations online. I appreciate the job of someone running YouTube or Twitter or wherever is an awful job. I would never want to do it, because you're like battling these pressures between controlling, preventing clear misinformation from being spread that could damage people, but also making sure that you're not shutting out good information. But I personally think in terms of in which direction they're going too heavily, they're going far too heavily in the narrowing of what's acceptable discourse. And particularly when we're trying to solve such complex issues right now, like like COVID, the fact that we're letting the WHO and a couple of other centralized health organizations dictate literally what treatments can and cannot be discussed in any way, like this whole ivermectin debacle. I don't know if ivermectin actually works. I'm not saying it does. I don't know. I think that there isn't enough evidence to draw a conclusion either way. That's why they need to do more RCTs. But the fact that YouTube, like if you mention ivermectin, it's like mentioning Voldemort, and you will get like struck with the ban hammer, or have your video taken down. I was like, that's what's been happening to Brett Weinstein. That's deeply worrying, because we need information to be able to flow so that we can hive mind our way out of this problem.
Especially if it's coming from scientists, you would think that we'd be more open to it.
You think maybe if it's like a biology PhD and a literal ICU doctor, which was this particular video that got taken down, discussing COVID, the ICU doctor's discussing his experiences treating COVID patients and like the best practice protocols. You'd think that would pass through the filter as something suitable. It's not like some crazy person wearing a tinfoil hat screaming into the abyss. So yeah, not that I doubt any technology, social media platforms are listening to this, but my advice to them would be like, I appreciate you're in a tough situation, but no one person has enough knowledge to be able to determine what isn't good information right now. No one does. And if you think you do, you are grossly mistaken. And if you think it's okay because you're getting your orders on high from like centralized health institutions, have a look and see how well they've handled this pandemic, and then question maybe whether they are a little bit stretched thin and overwhelmed themselves, and thus not either the best judges on this.
Yeah, I worry about how the algorithms are playing with outrage or academia. It's like favoring outrage over academia, for instance. It just seems really ironic.
Well, yeah, it's kind of that race to the bottom type dynamics again, right? Like outrage is engages the limbic system or the amygdala, and we're more likely to interact with the post when our amygdala is firing. So, anything that's incredibly exciting or incredibly outrageous or upsetting is going to get more clicks than something that's probably more likely correct and complex. So that's the other thing, and it's sad to see that academia. It's difficult because I think in some ways we are overly dependent on what's considered sort of, oh, this person is an expert and therefore we can only listen to them. In some ways we do that too heavily, but then in other ways we're democratizing is the word. We're discounting it. It's a really fine balance to strike, and there's certainly no one size fits all answer.
Yeah. On the podcast that you're looking to start, what are some of the topics that you're most interested in exploring in terms of maybe the evolution or transformation of the human animal into something technological?
I mean, I don't want to talk too much about it without sort of, I don't know, C and I are working on this together, so sure. I don't want to go too far out on a limb, but I would personally love to delve into like transhumanism in general. Mm-hmm. I'm pretty sure Steve will be interested in that one too. How do we coexist a lot? Assuming we manage to build AGI. How will what would a utopian landscape look like with an AGI, and what would a dystopian one look like? How do we make sure it's more like this one? There's so much effort. There's been so much art created about dystopias and so little created about utopias, and we need more art thinking about that, because we should be paying attention to the sticks driving us away from, okay, we definitely don't want that, but we need some carrots too, which is the most exciting thing about AGI. For example, it really is possibly our only way out of this mess.
Yeah, agreed.
So we need to be putting at least as much brain power into creating visions of utopia, of paradise, as we do into depicting dystopia.
Do you like the idea of brain-computer interfaces? Do you like let's get specific on technology. Do you, as we move forward, do you want to see things move to like basic income or resource-based economies, brain-computer interfaces? What are some of the most promising technological shifts?
I should preface this with, this is not my area of expertise. I haven't studied extensively into what the perfect economic political system should be. My guess is that we will need some kind of UBI. It just seems invariable. It's incredibly unlikely that we won't need something like that. Ideally, we would have some kind of technologically induced abundance, closed loop economy, system with a large social safety net, but that still allows for the right, just whatever the right ingredient of competition is, it'll be some kind of amalgamation of the best bits of capitalism, the best bits of socialism, the best bits of something else that we haven't thought of yet, and the best part, utilizing technology to help us develop that. That is basically like a higher order of complexity than what we've currently got. I mean, the trouble is, and this is partially what's going to be going into my new series of videos, is that competition as a sort of driving force has been incredibly powerful and by and large been actually very good. The competition aspect of capitalism is what's created so many of the great things that we have and improved the quality of our life. But we need to, there's a point where competition becomes a little too powerful, where this, zero-sum interactions, if you can't contain if you don't manage to contain the externalities, will become negative sum overall. And I fear that we're heading towards that if we're not already there. So we need to have some kind of more evolved system that lessens the power of competition, or just, it keeps competition in a box so that it doesn't get too out of control, because, we're ultimately on a finite playing field, and you can't play win-lose too long, because then you'll break the board.
I was going to say, prevents the changing of the playing field, right? My concern, I guess, with competition is that the people who win get more power to change the game. So it no longer becomes, fair competition,
right,
for the masses.
Yeah, the feedback loops become, there's too much sort of self-propagation in terms of sort of competitive advantage. Yeah, so I don't have a concise answer to that. I'm kind of lost in the metaphysical realm right now between the interplay of cooperation and competition, as though they were entities. Largely inspired by Scott Alexander's Meditations on Moloch.
Yeah.
If I imagine a large portion of your reader base will have read it. Anyone who hasn't should. It's incredible. That's what I want to try and video.
I was going to say, I'll add it in the show notes to try to make sure we can push people along. Well, for you personally, I guess one thing I was getting at, would you do it? Would you personally sign up for a brain-computer interface or a brain upload, or in terms of transhumanism? Are you excited about it or no?
Oh, I mean, of course. I would love the option to be a digital girl for a little while and be a biological girl for a little while. I would like to try them both out, but I would like to maintain optionality to switch between the two. So I don't think I would like it to be just the case that we would move to a purely digital space that we all exist in, but maybe we're in one anyway. Yeah, would I be the first person to sign up for the brain computer interface? Definitely not. But will I be in the first 10% of humanity? I hope so. I think it's really exciting. I think it might be the most elegant solution to some of the risks posed by emerging technologies, particularly AGI. So yeah, I'm pretty gung ho on it. I think it's definitely an area that it's one of the areas I'm most excited about. Yeah.
Yeah.
How cool would it be to sort of be able to just play around in digital simulations that exist purely in cyberspace?
I'm 100%
I couldn't
for
think
it.
of anything more fun. Yeah, I think it's fantastic. I've not met anyone who's against it, but maybe my social circles are too.
I was gonna say, I think you have very specific social circles. I feel like I shouldn't meet a lot of people who are like that, but Portland is pretty like far left and pretty hippie and down to earth. And as much as I came here for my love of some of those things, it's a community that definitely has what we like to call in the community the skin bag bias. So it's not super fond of.
Yeah, I mean, I do like being a skin bag though. That's the thing. But maybe that's my status quo bias speaking. Maybe it's just because I haven't sampled the delights of the digital realm enough. But I don't know. I'm still at my core. Like I grew up in nature. I grew up like riding horses, living in the dirt with animals, and I gain so much happiness out of just being in the wilderness. I think. I don't know. I do feel a deep affinity with the nature hippies. I still like am I more one of them than I am a technologist? I don't know, honestly. And I think by and large, most people are a combination of the two. So we have to find that symbiosis.
Like you said, nuance is sexy. It doesn't have to be one or the other. It can be both.
Right. Yeah.
How do you feel about the technology coming down the line in terms of AI? I know that you have done some. I think you've spoken a bit about warning people of AI and what you're concerned with. Is there particular aspects of it that you are concerned about?
Well, I mean, the main thing is that be careful what you wish for. By definition, if we manage to build a super intelligence, then that is now going to be the dominant force. However it may look, however it manifests, I don't know. But for the same reason that we can't, even though we're physically weaker than chimpanzees, we can ultimately control them and determine what their habitat and lifestyle is like if we want to. We're much more intelligent than them. And so a super intelligent will have their same super intelligence will be able to control us. And anyone who thinks that you can just unplug it and you'll be fine is delusional, because they're just not thinking about what it means to be super intelligent. That said, like my intuition sort of says to me that by definition, if something is super intelligent, it will be a nuanced, complex thinker, and won't necessarily be like, oh yes, I'm going to turn these humans, their atoms, into just more of the thing that I like. I just can't see it doing that unless it had a really, really, really good reason, in which case it's probably a reason that we would, I don't know, kind of like the utility monster or whatever. It's the idea that there's something that just will gain so much more value out of something than we could even perceive, and thus we should always let it do it. I don't know, it just seems somewhat implausible to me that an AI would be so short-sighted to just turn the universe into paperclips. But that doesn't mean to say that we shouldn't proceed with caution, because that we don't know for certain that that's not the case. And in the cases where that does happen, that's so bad and so sad. What a sad end to the universe to just like be the result of just some like poorly defined optimization process to build this one particular thing, better served Instagram videos that just happens to be super intelligent, like just tiles the universe with dancing cats and teenagers.
It's already happened.
Yeah, I know. Oh, don't get me started. I have deep fears about just TikTok and those types of highly lowbrow, highly viral, deeply entertaining content to young people. It's shaping, but maybe that's just
not shaping a generation for the best future.
Yeah, but then again, that's what my parents said about me and my obsession with heavy metal, so maybe it's just that happening again.
Look where you are now.
Exactly.
I want to respect your time. I know we probably set it more for an hour, and I don't want to run over here. But I want to give you a chance to share anything that you're working on that you'd like to direct people to, maybe some of these new videos, or if you can talk about the podcast yet, anything at all.
Yeah, I don't have any, in terms of the podcast, we don't have even a social media account or anything yet. The main thing, if you don't follow me already, please follow me on Twitter, because I say a lot of weird stuff, but some of the tweets are actually valuable and interesting, I think. And follow me on YouTube. I'm horrible at following any kind of posting schedule. The gaps between videos gets longer and longer, but yeah, my new series of videos, I hope will be the right mix of educational and entertaining. And it's on a topic that I think is really important, which is how we deal with this concept of Moloch and, like negative sum, excessively rivalrous competition, and these bad systems that the sort of civilization gets stuck in. So kind of a mixture between the writings of Eliezer Yudkowsky and Scott Alexander. So yeah, come check me out on there.
Perfect. All right, we'll send everybody your way. Liv, I want to thank you so much for taking the time and chatting with me. Thank
you so much. This was awesome. It's a pleasure to be invited on this kind of podcast. Yeah, it was a pleasure to meet you.